By the summer of 1966, the Communist forces in central Vietnam had already put it in writing. Captured Viet Cong orders carried one standing instruction about the South Koreans: avoid them, break contact, do not engage unless a Viet Cong victory was 100% certain. The order came first. This is the night that proved why someone wrote it. The 14th of February, 1967. A low hill on the edge of a village called Tra Binh Dong in Quang Ngai Province, 12 kilometers north of the city. Inside the wire, 294 Korean Marines. Out in the tree line, a regiment. Somewhere between 1,500 and 2,400 men moving up through the dark. At 23:20 hours, the first strand of barbed wire was cut. By morning, 15 of those Korean Marines were dead. And by the Korean count, more than 240 of the men who came for them lay tangled in the wire and scattered across the hill. This is the Battle of Tra Binh Dong, and this is why the NVA were ordered never to attack a South Korean firebase again. They were called the Blue Dragons, the 2nd Korean Marine Brigade, activated at Pohang on the 20th of September 1965, with President Park Chung-hee standing on the parade ground to watch them go. They came to Vietnam in stages: Cam Ranh Bay first, then Tuy Hoa, then north to the Chu Lai region in August of 1966, under the operational control of the U.S. Marines. The arrangement was unusual. By agreement with the American command, the Koreans drew U.S. air support on the same priority as American units, and a 2-man fire control team from the 1st Anglico was attached to each of their infantry companies. But the thing that set the Blue Dragons apart was never the equipment. Early in the war, they were still carrying weapons left over from another one. It was the willingness to close the distance. Korean Marines trained in Taekwondo, and they fought hand-to-hand by doctrine, not by accident. When the line was breached, they did not fall back from it. They went into it. The enemy had noticed. American officers who served alongside them recorded a simple battlefield fact: Viet Cong and North Vietnamese units bypassed the Koreans when they could. That captured order, avoid the Koreans, do not engage unless victory is certain, was not rhetoric. It was a documented fear, written down by men who had met the Blue Dragons before and did not want to again. General William Westmoreland would tell the U.S. Congress that he ranked the Koreans among the best fighters in Vietnam. The men in the tree line at Tra Binh Dong knew all of that. They came anyway. They had a reason to gamble. The position on the hill belonged to the 11th Company, 3rd Battalion. A single rifle company, dug in alone on contested ground, far enough out that it could be cut off and swallowed before help arrived. It was the classic isolated company base, and the lesson behind it had already been written in blood earlier in the war. A company base that breaks at the wire dies. The whole concept rested on one fragile assumption: that the men inside would keep fighting after the perimeter was already gone. The communist plan was built to test exactly that. Cut the communications, surround the hill, breach the wire with engineers and flamethrowers, overrun the whole thing inside an hour. What the attackers did not know was that the Koreans were waiting. A Viet Cong defector, a former training camp commander, had already told them what was coming. The plan was to wipe out the 11th Company, then push on to Quang Ngai City and the big American base at Chu Lai. So the Koreans dug. The perimeter was shaped like a heart, roughly 300 meters by 200, 30 meters high, about 800 meters around. Trenches linked the fighting positions. There were mortar pits and command posts, a double belt of barbed wire, and a minefield seeded into the likely approach lanes, on the order of 140 mines and more than 60 claymores. 3 rifle platoons, a weapons platoon, a 4.2-inch mortar section, and 81mm tubes inside the wire, with Brigade 105 and 155mm artillery on call. It was a hard target. The attackers brought a regiment to crack it. The 40th and 60th North Vietnamese battalions, reinforced by a local Viet Cong battalion out of Quang Ngai. And the weather brought them a gift. The night came in with fog, thick enough that the AC-47 gunship circling overhead, the one the Americans called Spooky, could not find the ground to fire on. For the worst hours of the night, the defenders had their artillery, and they had what they could carry. Nothing from the air. At 23:20 hours, a Marine in a forward observation post caught movement to the west. He called it back to 3rd Platoon. Out in the dark, hands were already working at the wire, cutting lanes through the double belt. The first illumination went up. The first volleys went out. Then the regiment hit them. The assault came from several directions at once, behind a wall of mortar and recoilless rifle fire. Engineers ran Bangalore torpedoes under the wire and blew gaps in it. Flamethrowers washed the trenches, and the perimeter broke. Not once. By most accounts, the line was penetrated twice that night, with the heaviest break-in landing on 3rd Platoon's sector. This is the part of the story that captured order was written about. In the breached sector, the 1st Squad of 3rd Platoon refused to give ground. Their squad leader was a staff sergeant named Bay Jang Chun. His men fought with their rifles until the range closed, then with grenades. Then, when the enemy was in among them, with entrenching tools and pickaxes, and finally with their hands. That image, bullets, then grenades, then the shovel, then the bare fist, is the whole battle compressed into a single squad. It is the most cited moment of the night, and it earned that place. It was happening all along the line. By the company's account, a private named Kim Myong-deok killed 10 attackers from his position as they came at him. By Korean accounts, a sergeant named Lee Hak-won took a grenade in each hand, waited until the enemy had closed around him, and threw himself into the middle of them, killing himself and 4 of the men coming through the wire. Through all of it ran the close-quarters violence the attackers had been warned about. Bayonets fixed, trenches cleared at arm's length, in the dark, in the fog, with whatever was in a man's hands. But the moment that defined the night did not happen inside the wire. It happened outside it. An enemy mortar section had set up close to the perimeter and was dropping rounds directly onto the 1st Platoon. 2nd Lieutenant Shin Won-bae, the platoon commander, made a decision that outnumbered men are not supposed to make. He went out after it. Shin took a fire team roughly 100 meters beyond his own wire, into the dark, toward the guns that were killing his men. With Staff Sergeant Oh Sung-hwan working in alongside him, he closed on the mortar crew with machine gun fire and grenades and wiped it out. Then he turned his platoon around, came back through the gap, and helped seal the perimeter shut. Think about what that takes. The position is breached. You are outnumbered 5, 6, 8 to 1. The standard move is to pull in tight and hold. The Koreans attacked outward, and they were not alone out there. 2 American Marines from the Anglico team, Lance Corporals Jim Porta and Dave Long, were in the middle of all of it. They killed infiltrators inside the wire, worked what artillery they could bring to bear, joined a counterattack to restore the line, and dragged the wounded clear. 2 men in a foreign company's worst night, refusing to be anywhere but in it. Before dawn, the enemy massed for one last push. The Koreans cut it apart. The assault came on, ran into massed fire, and broke. The ranks that had been pressing the wire for hours simply came apart, and the survivors melted back into the fog before the sun came up, leaving their dead where they fell. When the light came, the defenders counted more than 100 bodies inside the perimeter alone. The final tally, by the Korean reckoning, 15 Marines killed. Between 243 and 246 of the attackers dead, 2 taken prisoner. Roughly 16 of them for every one of the defenders. The numbers do not compute. They were never supposed to. The consequences were immediate and they were concrete. The planned attacks on Quang Ngai City and the base at Chu Lai never came. After Tra Binh Dong, the North Vietnamese called them off. And the warning in those captured documents only hardened. Papers taken after the Tet Offensive the following year repeated it. Do not engage the Koreans until victory is fully assured. South Korea answered the night with more decorations than it gave for any other action of the war. Captain Jung Kyung-jin, the company commander who held the hill together, received the Taeguk Medal, Korea's highest decoration, its rough equivalent of the Medal of Honor. So did Lieutenant Shin Won-bae, the man who went out through the wire. Tra Binh Dong is the only battle of the entire war for which the Taeguk was awarded to 2 men. In the whole conflict, it was given only 11 times. Staff Sergeant Bae and a senior non-commissioned officer received the Ulchi Medal, the country's second highest award for valor. 11 more men received the Chungmu Medal. Both the United States and Korea decorated the company as a unit, and President Park Chung-hee ordered every enlisted Marine in the 11th Company promoted 1 rank, the first time a Korean unit had been promoted whole since the Korean War. The press called them the legend makers. The legend traveled further than anyone expected. Years later, a young American officer who had watched the Korean Marines fight in Vietnam, James Jones, who would one day command the entire U.S. Marine Corps, pointed to them as part of the reason the Marines built their own close combat program. The New York Times called Tra Binh Dong the South Koreans' greatest victory of the war. But strip away the medals and the headlines, and what is left is a harder, plainer truth. The defenses failed. The wire was cut. The mines did not stop them. The perimeter broke, not once but twice. The gunship never fired a round. Almost everything that was supposed to keep that company alive did not work. What worked was a decision. The decision, made by 294 men with the enemy already inside their trenches, to keep fighting after the line was lost. To close the distance instead of breaking from it. Bullets, then grenades, then the entrenching tool, then the bare hand. That is why the order was written. And that is why, after that night, no one was foolish enough to ignore it.